the other way before. Okay, sorry. If I had to describe what I do, it's hard to say. Hello everybody, I'm currently on the 3rd floor of Bracken Library, and I've been editing this video for literally hours and hours and hours already today. I'm here to tell you how this video is set up and how it's going to work. So there are 4 main parts. This is the introduction, and I'm just going to talk about how my job works, what I do, what this project is, and we'll go through each of the events and what they look like and what that means. After that, we have a section about why this project is important. So I interview Dr. Blom and Brooke, my boss and my coworker, and we talk about like the statistics, the criminal justice facts, and more things about why this project is important and necessary and needed. Then in the 3rd part, we talk about immersive theater and different projects that reflect similar goals to the Eyewitness project and how the immersion element played into their success. And then I'll come back at the end in this very same chair and talk about a conclusion where we wrap it all up. We talk about what we learned and where we go from here. So these videos were recorded throughout the year. So there's a lot of things that I said in like September specifically that really changed and grew as I went on through the semester. So things might seem a little disjointed, and hopefully by the end you can get a fuller picture of how the year was also not just about me already like doing this job successfully, but really learning what I was doing, what I wanted to do, and it really helped me grow as an artist and as a person. So all of that is kind of reflected as I go on this journey over the year. Yes, hope you enjoy. Good luck. Have fun. So basically I work for a professor. The professor's name is Dr. Robin Blom, and I'm sure you'll hear that name a lot. Love you, Dr. Blom. He is teaching a class based off of eyewitness errors for journalists to see how they have to be careful when using eyewitnesses. He's been awarded a grant that will pay for us to create these simulated events. So there are 6 events, and I'll walk you through all of them, don't worry. It is my job to logistically and artistically plan for and create immersive experiences / events. Our goal is to study eyewitness errors. Breaking that down again into like what I do logistically and what I do artistically. Logistically, I am just planning for everything. We're making checklists, we're making prop lists, we're writing scripts, which is artistic as well. We're finding out how many actors we need. We're looking at what would most benefit the students in the class, how everything is designed. And this will make more sense, I think, as we get into the events. It's just my job to prepare for everything so that those events run smoothly. Artistically, it is also my job to immerse them. So while I have a coworker named Brooke, who you'll meet, she's so wonderful and lovely. So while I do have Brooke, who is there to like aid me as a criminal justice major in, all the things that she knows, it's my job to immerse everyone. So that's the eyewitnesses, which are the students, journalists, also students. And then we also have a camera crew who we're trying to fit into the story. So everybody has to have a purpose for being there in the first place. And then it's my job to kind of guide them through that in a holistic way so that when we're looking at their eyewitness reports from journalists, it feels more realistic. I believe that this applies to directing in a lot of ways. As a directing major, a lot of what I learn about is all based on story. That's basically literally my whole job. But to have it be so immersive that it feels real for people, it's a very interesting line, because while the students, aka our audience, needs to live through this experience as if it were real, because it is real and truthful to them, it's like exactly what they're experiencing. It needs to feel as if there weren't months and months of artistic and logistic preparation, which there obviously is. So there's so many levels to it, but that's my job. I think I'm really interested in like making immersive experiences versus like traditional theater. I love traditional theater and I want to make it forever and ever and ever. Traditional is like a weird word. It's like, what does that mean? But when I think about like immersive experiences, that seems so exciting to me that I really want to find out how to combine, like, I'm going to use it again, traditional theater with these immersive experiences that I'm having so much fun creating. But part of that today was creating this case file where I wrote like the letter that was from like a mysterious organization that was trying to find David Letterman, or like I have to Photoshop pictures of David Letterman. We put in a note from his son that I wrote a note that he wrote to his son that I crumpled up and took a picture of like it was evidence. We made a missing persons report. Like all of that like detail stuff is so fun, and there's so much work still to be done that it's like I just think this is the best job in the world. And yeah, I think I've been doing this for like a month almost, and we've gotten pretty far. Like we have outlines for everything, but we still have to now it's time where we put like the real work in, which is tough. But that's all I have for you today. Talk to you maybe Wednesday or another day. Okay, goodbye. Hello, it's me coming live from Bracken Library, 3rd floor. Here we go. We're gonna go through all of the events, and so basically what I'm gonna do is just talk through what was happening in all of the events, and then I thought it would be fun to rate them. So I'm also gonna rate them based on like how much fun they were, how easy they were. There's a lot of stuff we're gonna talk about. Okay, let's go. So our first and easiest event by far was the museum heist, and basically in this one there was a piece of art that was stolen, and when we rehearsed this, you can see basically how it was going to go is Muhammad there in the plaid was going to hear a cue over the walkie-talkie and then take the painting and run, and then Stephen that was in another group heard that cue and would take the other painting based off of that and run from another room. And so this is kind of what it's supposed to look like. You can see it from our walkthrough. I was really nervous for this event just because it was our first one, but it definitely was the simplest to put together, and all in all it went well. Here's us like getting ready, getting wristbands, and me waiting with the walkie-talkie. So during the actual heist, Muhammad, unfortunately, I don't know if he didn't hear his cue or what happened, but as you can see, there's a real like hesitation, even though at this point the cue had gone off. And I think we gave it again. And we just had to kind of improvise, but there he is finally running off with it. And then you can see the students, they really like don't have big reactions even as Stephen runs by. And that's only one group. There are 3 other groups behind, but during the event they always seem a little not excited, but by the time you hear their interviews, they're eating it up. And I would rate this one, I don't know, 7 out of 10. In our second event, there was a live studio talk show with a proposal, and a blackout occurs. And chaos ensues, and you can't really see it right here. Hopefully you can see it in the next clip, but there's a bunch of props set over it that we turn around during the blackout. So all the actors were running on their own like little paths and turning things around. So the goal of this one was to see how much students remembered during the event and what they noticed changed in the background. And a lot of them actually didn't say anything. They were like, oh, the big thing was that there was like a proposal and then the ring went missing. So a lot of them were like, the ring went missing, but there was so much more going on that they just did not pick up. We also had a magician in this one, which was really fun. And once again, they seemed disinterested, but once you hear the interviews, they get into it. I'd rate the proposal an 8 out of 10. The Comic-Con was by far our most expensive event and the one that drained me and Brooke definitely the most physically and emotionally. First off, you can see the whole premise of this one was that 2 Comic-Con goers are wearing the same Spider-Man outfit and they break into a fight, and it's a knife fight and one of them kills the other one and runs off. This was my first time doing fight choreo, so it was really interesting for me, and we worked with Ben Brock, who was wonderful to work with, and our actors were wonderful, of course, and it was very time consuming, but we also got a lot of props for this one, which really is why we spent so much money, which was really fun. There I am almost hitting Brooke with a lightsaber, but oh, and here's this little Grogu, like remote control Grogu that we loved playing with in the office. And it kind of like, even though there was a lot to put together and we were there for hours, especially Brooke and Dr. Blom and our GA volunteer helpers, it really all came together. You can see the students were really liking it, and there was so much for them to do. We had people donate props. We bought literally so many props, and we had trivia in the background. Our actors dressed up for like managing the booths, and overall it was just really good. Oh, there's one of our actors right there. You can see they're kind of mingled in. And see if you can spot Brooke's friend in a Garfield suit. I think that's so funny. There she is. Shout out to Caitlin. The journalists were actually there for part of this event, which normally doesn't happen. But then before the fight, they were put into another room for a press conference. And we waited about 5 minutes to do the fight, which you can see here. I wish that we had not waited as long because I think the students were getting kind of bored with just walking around. You can see they're all kind of sitting at the coloring tables by this point, and they actually this is what I mean, they don't always give the reactions we would assume they would give because they're seeing a literal knife fight in front of them, but they know it's for a class. So at this point they're kind of bored. At one point in a second they all kind of laugh, but besides that it went off oh, shout out to Anna who was like pushing everyone back just in case, but it really went off really well, and I'm really happy that it went off without a hitch, but it was rough to put together. I'm going to rate the Comic-Con 9 out of 10. It was terrible to put together, so difficult, but worth it, and it looked really cool. Probably way cooler than the other ones, I think. I only have a 4-second clip of the theater. I'd rate it a 4 out of 10, not much happened. So if the proposal was the most rehearsal heavy, and if Comic-Con was the most props heavy and setup heavy, the library was the most mental stress and took the most time pre-planning wise. As you can see on the board, basically what we did was create a loop throughout the library where you are going through and solving puzzles and like solving riddles and decoding things, and there's like hidden clues everywhere. So this is someone solving the first riddle that we wrote that I found based on a Nancy Drew Hunt a Killer game, and we thought it would be pretty easy, but it took her about 9 minutes. She did eventually get it though, but that was way too long, so we had to kind of cut it down. There she is, she got it though. And then when Dr. Blom did it, we were like, oh, maybe it'll be faster. It was not faster. It took Dr. Blom 13 minutes, so we had to give them a little more clues than we wanted to decode it a little faster, but they all did. And once we started the event, there wasn't really much time to, or very much of a way to get lots of footage because it was happening all over the library. But here they are opening their case files that we made. It was all about how David Letterman was replaced by a clone, and we printed out all these case files and taped them up, which was so much fun. I love this one because it felt more immersive with like props that they were interacting with, more interactive for them. And this is a really nice close-up shot of Dr. Blom. Love that for him. They all, during interviews, really seemed to enjoy it a lot more because they were participating in it more, and I think that's a really big key that I want to focus on if I do any of these in the future, is how interactive it is. And yes, I would rate this one, honestly, 10 out of 10. A lot of pre-planning, but it was worth it, and it was pretty easy to put together because we planned so much. Our final event was literally planned in 2 weeks. So you can see this alien surgery video being played on a loop. There's an alien language in the background, and you'll see a puzzle that they had to decode in this room. There were 3 rooms, and it was basically like an escape room with 2 groups at the same time.
I was on night patrol a few weeks ago. It's usually no one. Just a couple real late night studies.
This video is of footage that we recorded literally an hour before the event, actually like 30 minutes before the event, so that they could play back what was happening in the room. It was so cool. And when they walked in, they all had to put FBI badges on and hazmat suits on, which I think is so funny. They really liked that. And this is what the space looked like. This was in our office, so even though we did order a lot of things, we also were able to do a lot more, and it didn't seem as stressful to plan because it was in our own venue. We didn't have to ask for permission or check in with anybody over and over again. We kind of just got to make a mess, which was so fun. We used black lights and fake blood. It was amazing. And Dr. Blom had somebody peer reviewing, which was so funny. Here he is. 10 out of 10, would do again.
My name is Brooke Wilcox. I'm a criminal justice and criminology major, and my job title is Eyewitness live action coordinator.
I am Robin Blum, Associate Professor of Journalism, and I organized this crazy live event series.
Every person in my life has asked me what I do with this job, and I never have an exact answer for them, but I feel like I would describe the job as like fun, rewarding, but also like a lot of planning and a lot of thought that goes into like event planning that you wouldn't necessarily think about, I guess. I wish, like, if I could say everything, like, there's just so many words, but I feel like nothing, like, truly fully encompasses it because we just do so many different things that, like, nothing could really encompass what we do.
Well, I taught this class 4 times in the Honors College, and I wanted to pull in journalism students in the experience. So originally, I got a grant to organize these live events, do it for journalists, and then have the eyewitnesses basically being hired, being actors. And then I got the idea to actually pull in the Honors College again to make it a combined class where students would experience being an eyewitness, but also being a reporter and better understand how difficult it is for reporters to talk to eyewitnesses and report accurately on things that are happening.
I think this research is super important because I am a criminal justice and criminology major. So I have seen firsthand how eyewitness misperceptions and things like that can end up with horrible consequences of people being put to death on death row or living their whole lives in a prison system that is not beneficial to anybody involved. And so I think this work is really important to kind of open the mind and the eyes up of people on the outside who maybe don't study this every day or go to college or understand anything about eyewitness misperceptions. But the most important part of all of it, I feel like, is as someone who could be an eyewitness to something, like knowing that there could be a chance that I am incorrect, or like knowing that like I have to really pay attention and like I will never if I ever witness a crime speak on something that I am not 100% confident about, even if that, because it could literally ruin someone's life.
Yeah, there have been a few thousand people that have been exonerated here in the US in the past few decades. They were in prison for like a decade or two or three, sometimes more than 40 years. And a large majority, about 75% of those cases, have some eyewitness misidentification in there, or it's literally the only piece of so called evidence on which the person was convicted. There's no weapon, there's no other physical evidence that ties those people to a particular scene, a crime, except that an eyewitness claimed that they were there. And that eyewitness turned out to be mistaken, as later on, for instance, with DNA evidence, becomes clear that they weren't the perpetrators of those crimes. So that's why eyewitness misidentification is such an important element.
My favorite part of the job is watching all of their reactions at the end when they're being interviewed. Like after the event happens and going into the interview rooms, like seeing and hearing what they're saying and how they're reacting is so fun to me because a lot of times they miss a lot of like what's important, but then they'll make connections that like we would feel like is super easy, but like it takes them a second to like get there. And I always laugh and have the best time when I watch them.
Ooh, favorite. I mean, this event was the best by far. Maybe the Comic Con, because it was even like a larger scale than that we did today. We did a lot of details in this sixth one, but to turn an entire ballroom in a believable Comic Con, I think that was very cool. Um, People were very immersed in their roles and their tasks in the event. So I think that one was probably the most memorable, just to seeing the grand scale, having people come up or actors being dressed up in characters. I thought that was very believable as a Comic Con.
I think the most surprising part about hearing and seeing what they remember is how much they actually miss, or the little things that they think are important that actually have nothing to do with it, and the big things that they've dismissed as being unimportant that were actually really important pieces of the puzzle. You never know walking into it what your different audience is going to take away from the experience as a whole. And I think they've all taken away different things from every experience. So it's like they all remember different things. And I think that's the most surprising.
Well, they took way longer. um, I think we got way more complex in what I was thinking initially. When I got the grant, and then have two students work on it. I almost thought that there was a large part that I didn't need to be involved in, but even with the three of us, 7.5 hours a week, it was barely enough to get all these organized. And I think we started to challenge ourselves and make it more immersive story rather than just like a little event. I think if you think about the museum, which was relatively easy, still not easy to organize because you have to talk to museum people and have different tour guides. But compare that to what we did today with having two escape rooms simultaneously in like a matter of a week, I think we pulled in much more immersive storytelling that is memorable for students and also probably allow them to learn better what the class is attended to. I mean, it worked out extremely well. The combination of a theater and criminal justice worked really well. Um, that was my goal. I think we exceeded our expectations uh, dramatically. Well, I think that's what we found out along the way, that we needed to have a higher level, because in all these events, maybe except for the first one, they did expect something and it was still extremely unexpected. And that was like the way we had set up these events, that they couldn't really anticipate what would happen. Like if we had done the museum as the fourth one, they probably would have figured out that there was going to be something with stolen paintings. But we were basically a step ahead with every event that we organized, and I think that's why the complexity came in, and the storytelling, the immersive storytelling that we added to it, to make sure that they never anticipated.
So now that there's a clearer idea of what I do in my job and why we're doing this project in the first place, I really want to talk now about immersive theater and how these two ideas work together. So I really want to talk about how this job is very similar to directing, because it seems sometimes when I'm doing it that they're two very different things. And then when I'm in it, I'm like, oh no, they share a lot of the same skill sets, and I'm doing a lot of the same tasks that I do in a regular traditional like theater rehearsal space. So I've written some things that I think pertains to directing that I do in this job. The biggest one would be collaboration. Me, Brooke, and Dr. Blom were all working together to create these ideas, to logistically prepare for these ideas. I have said logistically prepare so many times, but I'm leaving this in. And we do work together like that, but also we're working with different venues. We're working from like we'd have to talk to people in Bracken to like talk about how we can use the library space, how we can do that safely and efficiently, without causing too much of a ruckus outside for the rest of the library. In the student center, how could we use that space? How can we bring a prop knife into that space without letting anyone else see? So we have to collaborate that way. We have to collaborate with actors. We have to collaborate with the police, which I've never done before. So it's very collaborative, not only with my direct coworkers, but with this large like network of people that we have to work with to get each event up and running. The next one is communication. That kind of goes hand in hand, but obviously if I'm collaborating with those people, I have to be communicating and I have to be doing that efficiently. Also with actors, since that's what I focus on specifically, I'm always having to communicate with actors. And a really funny and difficult part of this process has been when actors commit and then have to drop out. That's happened on every single event on the day of an event. And so I very quickly am having to communicate with as many actors and as many people as I know, like, please can you fill in? And so I have to make sure that I'm using my time efficiently, especially because I only work on this project during my scheduled work hours. Sometimes I go a little beyond that if I have to answer an email or something, but I try really hard to keep that like balance there so that I'm not thinking about this project 24/7. And because of that, we have very short rehearsal periods. We have very short planning times where I'm actually in communication with everybody. So I have to make sure that I'm doing that efficiently and that I'm communicating as clearly as possible so that we can get the show on the road. Um, Rehearsals, this is like the most typical, theater wise, we've written these scripts, we've planned these events, but that's not necessarily what a director does. They're not writing scripts, they're not creating the original material. But I do run a rehearsal space. I have to create this environment that is safe and welcoming and where everyone feels that they can get their best work done. I have to meet people where they're at, no matter if that's an actor or Brooke or Dr. Blum or even the students. Like, that's my job, is to meet them at their level and to provide solutions. And along with that, I do a lot of world building, especially in the planning period. That's really where it felt like I was doing like analysis work, where I was going through the text that we had created and trying to figure out how I can build a world from that. Um, and especially since it's like more immersive, I'm doing that on a much grander scale than I've done before. And I also have to worry about how I'm keeping things safe, how I'm keeping things hidden, because even though these are public events, I have to make sure the public doesn't actually see them. So I guess in that way, it's not a public event, it's a private event. But anyway, I just mean to say that, like, I've never done something, especially the library I'm thinking about the most because it's the one that happened most recently, but it was scattered throughout. It was like a scavenger hunt scattered throughout all of Bracken, and we had to make sure that no one else in the library was alerted to our presence, and we had to give like a disclaimer to the students involved and cover things up with newspapers, which we've done more times before this, but it was all very secretive, and we were, having to have special rooms unlocked and just making sure that I was building a cohesive. To me, I don't know. Maybe this isn't as important to Dr. Blom, but it's also very important to me to have like a singular aesthetic vision, um, so that we're pushing forward a more immersive space that the students can really like live in and feel immersed in. So that was really difficult with Bracken. Like, it was easier on like the studio proposal when we're in Studio A. I'm putting up props like we're all in this location, the singular location, or the museum that pretty much lent itself to an art heist. But with something like the library or even like Comic-Con, we had to create this space from nothing and turn it into a world. And that's like all that directing, not all that directing is, but that's a huge part of directing. And then obviously I'm finding actors. Very easy. Not easy, but very, it's one of the main things you do. And the last thing that I wrote down was the ability to pivot where needed. Um, there are a lot of times when things are not going according to plan, especially the morning before an event or like as an event is happening. There's a lot of things that go wrong, and you just have to be able to guide everyone um to find a way to get us back on track. And that's what I do as a director too. So it seems very much like I am being a director. That's just not my title. And it's kind of sometimes a little more fun because I get a little more involved. Not I mean As a director, it's like you're involved in a little bit of everything. And you're talking to the people. Like, I'm talking to the designers, but I'm not designing the show. I'm talking to the actors, but I'm not acting the show. I'm guiding. I'm forced to kind of like push us in a certain direction. But with this, I'm also like doing everything. So I am designing things, I am writing scripts, I am, sometimes I have to act a little, um, unfortunately. And so that's also been interesting because I get to, as a coordinator, step into a little more roles. I feel very much like playwright, stage manager, director combined, and I don't know, it's really fun. I get to practice things that I haven't been able to practice as much as a director, which is also really fun. So this is the research portion of this video essay, and basically I have done a lot of research about like different immersive experiences and how that interacts with me as a director. This semester in my directing topics class, we had to make a presentation about our vision and voice as a director, and I used this opportunity to really deep dive into why I love immersive experiences and how I want to create immersive theater. And even though I couldn't really narrow down the exact definition that I was going for, or like I couldn't super define the art that I really want to create. I felt really connected to the images and the productions that I was sharing, and I got a lot of good feedback and a lot of interesting notes that I could take with me. And so while researching for this video, I was really able to close in on the more specific aspects of immersive theater that I'm really interested in, and especially how they relate to this project and how they relate to me as a director, and the aspects that are important to me as an artist. So when I talk about immersion, what am I talking about? I want to define that first. And I think this quote from Daniel Turner's research article on spatial audio production for immersive media experiences sums it up the best, better than I ever could. Although there is, as yet, no standard definition of immersion, current literature supports the idea that immersion is a multifaceted concept. A recent study by Eaton and Lee identifies two overarching categories of immersion: passive immersion and active immersion. Passive immersion is defined as being related to a feeling of presence or being in an environment. This type of immersion has no requirement for the user to play an active role in the narrative. Active immersion relates to immersive media with an interactive or task based element, such as in video games, where the user needs to make a choice or be constantly attentive due to the task at hand. For example, a game that presents the user with choices that must be made in order to progress through the experience. Although Turner's paper talks about immersion in relation to audio production, I still think that this definition is beneficial and applicable to the immersive theatrical experiences that we're talking about here today. With this definition in mind, I was able to narrow down my search for similar experiences to the Eyewitness project. I ended up finding a few productions that I really want to talk about that seem to fit very well with Dr. Blom's research. And I'm just going to do a short little deep dive into each of them and why they had such a big impact and why the immersion factor in these experiences made them so impactful. Before we go into each of them, I just want to talk a little bit about the parasocial contact hypothesis. Now, if you've ever seen one of my other video essay projects or you've read like literally any of my papers for school, I've talked about the parasocial contact hypothesis like all the time. So I'm just going to do a little tiny brief definition, but I will make sure that if you want more information, it's linked somewhere. Basically, the parasocial contact hypothesis takes information from two previous essays, the contact theory or intergroup theory and the parasocial interaction, and combines those to hypothesize that spending time with characters who are different from you reduces your prejudice and increases your empathy. My main reason for doing theater is to foster empathy, and that's what I really found was to be like the through line as I looked through all of these productions. So, we're going to start by talking about the immersive experience as much as I can. While researching as much as I can, I took a lot of my research from the essay As Much as I Can, Utilizing Immersive Theater to Reduce HIV-Related Stigma and Discrimination Toward Black Sexual Minority Men by Paul A. Burns. And I want to take this quote that they use to describe what the show is. As Much as I Can is an award-winning immersive theater-based HIV prevention intervention designed to inform the public about the challenges, barriers, and resilience experienced by Black, gay, and bisexual men affected by HIV in the South. The play presents a series of 11 dramatic vignettes of real-life situations often faced by Black, gay, and bisexual men.
In May of 2018, As Much as I Can premiered in New York City after a 2-year regional tour. It sold out every performance and was covered by top press such as Vibe, Billboard, and Forbes magazine. An immersive experience specifically designed to change behavior and engage communities. The script was developed in collaboration with men from the communities most affected, Baltimore, Maryland, and Jackson, Mississippi. The goal of the experience was to foster empathy for those living with HIV and to reduce the stigma facing Black gay men within healthcare, their homes, and their communities.
So this fits right along with the parasocial contact hypothesis and garnering empathy for people who are different from us. And the show is really important because Black, gay, and bisexual men are disproportionately affected by the HIV epidemic, especially those in southern states. Something that I really enjoyed about this production as I was reading about the scene-by-scene breakdown was that you get different parts of the scenes. You get different parts of the story in each scene, but you still get the full story. There are a lot of immersive experiences where I feel that people can miss certain things. There's a lot of content so that you can kind of choose your own adventure. But it seems like here the audience was getting everything, which I think is really important for this specifically, considering it was supposed to bring awareness to people about the HIV epidemic in relation to Black, gay, and bisexual men. A good example of this is in the living room scene, which a lot of people said was their most impactful scene. So in the scene right before it, scene 9, there's a phone call in which you only hear one side of the conversation. In the next scene, the living room scene, there is a mother who's fighting with her son, And after the mother leaves, the son picks up the phone and you hear the other half of that conversation. So, despite it being in two separate places, you're still getting both conversations. And I just think that's really cool. And also, an important aspect of immersive theater is how much you show the audience, how much they could possibly be missing out on by choosing their own adventure. And I really like that this, and specifically, was trying to make sure that the audience was getting as much necessary information as possible. I'm about to read a really long quote from the research paper, but I think it's really important and I don't want to like mess it up by paraphrasing it. So it says the immersive theater format allowed attendees to fully experience critical experiences faced by Black, gay, and bisexual men, such as fear of disclosure, the stigma and homophobia derived from family and the church, as well as discrimination and mistreatment from an uncaring healthcare system, which has been shown to create barriers to accessing HIV prevention, care, and treatment. As a result of their participation in the immersive theater experience, respondents reported they would more likely get involved or continue to be involved in educating others about HIV prevention strategies. Moreover, a majority of the respondents indicated an intention and willingness to intervene in situations where language was being used that was discriminatory or stigmatizing to the LGBTQ populations. So, as you can see, the data does reflect that this project was successful in its goal of fostering empathy, educating people, and making a sort of call to action that people would follow up with their healthcare providers afterwards. That was really successful. And I want to take one more quote from the article that says, the data revealed that both LGBTQ and heterosexual respondents were motivated to get involved after viewing the performance. Both gay and heterosexual respondents indicated that they were more likely to talk to friends and family about the play. I wanted to mention this because I think it's really important that they are reaching both heterosexual and LGBTQ plus audiences. If you're doing this kind of educational theater or theater that's meant to reach a community to create these lifelong impacts, it's important that you're reaching all kinds of people, not just the type of people the story is already about. Not that those people didn't need that education or to see their stories reflected, but it's also important that they're reaching the heterosexual participants or audience members so that they can go out and make changes in their own lives as well. Another really important aspect of immersive theater is that you cannot step away as easily as you may be able to in a traditional theater proscenium setup. Why am I having trouble saying this? I'm having trouble defining what I mean when I say this, because at first I said it's the director's job to keep them attentive, but with the show we're about to talk about in a second, that changes. It's not about keeping your focus on the show all like 100% of the time. And that's more accessible for people. But I do think that there's a sort of guidance, a sort of focus in on something that they want the audience to take away. Obviously, you need a message, you need to be saying something, or else it's just, why are you doing it? But I don't mean that in a didactic way. I just mean, anyway, I'm thinking about what I mean, but hopefully I'm getting it across. The director has a vision and the audience takes that vision. The job of a director is to make the show engaging for people. Let's stick with that. And I know that that's still true in a more traditional, like proscenium or even just not immersive theater, just like, a show that you see. I don't know what the opposite of immersive is. Even though that I know there is a point to that, there is a vision there, it's easy still to distance yourself from what's happening on stage. Um, and I want to take this quote from Sarah Hall, the play's writer and founder. Because you're in such an intimate setting, it's as if you're actually experiencing what's going on. It feels as if you are sitting in the church pulpit waiting on that sermon, or in the living room listening to a mother and son fight about him being gay, or witness the man confront the man that gave you HIV. I find that we often separate ourselves from others, but with the immersive aspect, it's impossible to do that. You can't walk away without asking yourself how complicit you are in what's happening to these men. And that's what I love about immersive experiences that I think is just summed up so perfectly in that quote. And I think it's just a new way of meeting our audiences where they're at, which is really exciting to me. When my dad, I talk about this a lot, but like when I think of my dad and what he thinks about theater, he's just thinking about like going into a proscenium stage, sitting down, watching a musical, heading out 2 hours later. And whenever I'm working, I always think about, or like finding the works that I want to create, I always think about him and what I think he would get out of it. I want him to like walk into the theater and be like, "Whoa, I did not understand that that's what theater could be." Or the space, maybe it's not even like a theater building, but I want him to walk into whatever I'm doing and be like, "Whoa, I didn't realize that it could impact me this much. I didn't realize that this is what theater could do." And I want him to go home and not be able to stop thinking about it. And immersion for me is the clearest way to do that. Um yeah, that was a tangent. Let's get on to our second show. I want to talk about one more immersive theater study with you all, and this one is called the Immersive Theater Experience for Individuals with Autism Spectrum Disorder. I want to start by saying that it's crucial that I know ahead of time that while this study provides data that's very insightful and very useful into the importance of accessibility in theater and the impact of immersive theater, the study also does not provide any data from an autistic person's perspective themselves. All of the gathered data was collected from parents and teachers of autistic children and adolescents up to the age of 22. So I just want to say that ahead of time because, especially as you get up into the older ages, there are many people on the autism spectrum disorder who are able to express the data that was gathered. It's not necessary that all of this comes directly from their caretakers, and even though that does provide a different sort of useful data, which we'll talk about, I wanted to start off by saying that this study does not include autistic voices speaking about their autistic experiences. With that being said, it does have useful and insightful data. Basically, there were 3 immersive experiences that were designed specifically for young ASD audience members. And there's a lot of different tactics that these creators use to create the best experience for their autistic audience members. So we're going to talk about the things that they did and why they were impactful. The first one is social stories. If you've never heard of a social story before, basically it's just a little way of showing what to expect before going into something. I am also autistic, so I'm speaking from the autistic experience. But when you go into something and as an autistic person without knowing ahead of time what to prepare for, it's really difficult to know how to behave in that social situation. So a social story is basically, it can be like a booklet or like a letter, or it can be written out visually. It's just something to go through so that you know ahead of time what to expect and what kind of behavior is like expected of you. And they provided what to expect before, during, and after the show, and they provide a social script. The next thing on the list is antecedent, and I literally just learned how to say this word, but antecedent-based intervention, which provided access to physical materials such as props or pictures of characters in costumes. So this also helps with familiarity. They're getting to see what will be on stage ahead of time, and a lot of, like, for me, a really big thing is like sensory seeking, and to have that experience with the props, to be able to see what they would feel like, to see what they look like, what they sound like, is helpful for focus in the moment when the show is going on. The next thing is a visual schedule, and this is like one of my favorite things. 2 of the immersive performances provided visual schedules to each child in attendance, which they were able to hold on to or keep nearby throughout the performance. One theater troupe used a large visual schedule for the group, and the main character physically moved a figure from one event to the next during the show. So this helps with familiarity of the show sequence and sets expectations time-wise. I really love this idea because you have like a little meter telling you how much time is left, what's coming next, and it doesn't take away. I think a lot of times people think that adding these resources takes away some of the like theatricality, but I think it really adds to it, especially the one where there's a large visual schedule and there was a character moving a figure around to show everyone what's going on. I think you can make that very theatrical and accessible. So it's like the best of both worlds. This final point I really also love. Performances that included specific sensory input provided the audience with additional opportunity for engagement. However, because many individuals with ASD also demonstrate sensory aversions, these sensory stimuli must be an optional part of the theater experiences in order to avoid both subtle and intense negative reactions. So, like I was saying earlier, like me personally, I'm very sensory seeking. So, like seeing the props, being able to interact with those would be really amazing for me. But there's also sometimes where, like, if I had to do that, I would like have a breakdown. So, having it be optional, it reminds me a lot in my directing topics in directing class. we were talking about Robert Wilson's Einstein on the Beach and how it's a very long, very almost tedious project to watch. Not almost, it's tedious to watch and to like be a part of. And we were talking about how they could leave the audience whenever they felt necessary. And I wonder if a similar setup would be good for people on the spectrum, because there's not an expectation that like you have to sit still, stay where you are, don't move, focus. If there was an experience where you kind of that lent itself, as immersive theater often does, to go as you please, go where you please, I think it would be more enticing for people on the spectrum. I do just want to remind us once again that in this study, no autistic individuals were asked directly about their experiences. It was through the parents and teachers and caretakers of these children on the spectrum. However, that does not mean that these parents and teachers don't have insight and valuable information to share. And I want to take this quote from the American Theater article called The Forest of Everywhere for Everyone. And it's about the project, The Forest of Everywhere. And this quote says, "One barrier we learned from talking to parents is that it is hard to justify paying for a ticket for themselves when the experience is really just for their kids," says Baker. "So the company created a pricing structure in which the first chaperone of any group can attend for free. Stations for breastfeeding mothers were also available throughout the run." So, once again, more accessibility. You're creating ways for everyone to have a part of this experience. And you're right, I can't justify buying a ticket for me when this experience is for my child who needs a different experience than most theater goers. So I think that's beautiful, that pricing structure and being able to create a space that's more accessible for everyone. I think immersive theater, once again, I've talked about this before, but I think it really lends itself to creating experiences that are more accessible, that work for everyone, and meet people where they're at. And you can give what you have to give to the experience, which is good. Welcome back. Finally, the conclusion. So now that we've seen everything, what does this mean for theater? What does this mean for me as an artist? Because as you can see, I feel like it's evident that this was like a really big year of growth for me. Specifically because of doing this project, I really found the kind of art that I wanted to create. And I want to show this clip from a video that I filmed over over Christmas break, as I was getting ready to go be an elf for my elf job, that talks about immersive theater. I've been thinking about how last year I was really interested in in the spring, I was really interested in the intersection between TV and theater, specifically how, episodic works I'm really interested in, but also very specifically how music and composed scores aids television and how it can aid theater and why it helps us feel so many emotions. So last year I was really interested in that, and now it's kind of morphed. And as I think about this job, being a live action coordinator, and also the job I'm dressed for, which is going to be an elf, I'm not the kind of elf who just stands there and welcomes people to Santa. It's a maze, it's an adventure, and it's an immersive experience, and that's what I'm really interested in. I love theater, but I want to take theater a step further, and I keep thinking about Artaud and theater of cruelty and appealing to the senses and intensity, that all has always seemed too much to me, even though I've always been very interested in Artaud's wanting to appeal to the senses first to grab the audiences. But if I could do that in an immersive way, in a way that was a little less intense, that's kind of experience I want to create. And I hope that this makes sense. Yeah, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but to see the evolution of me thinking about the intersection between TV and theater, and then moving into doing these things that are episodic in nature, being a live action coordinator, there's the 6 events, and each one is distinct, but they all kind of go together because they're all in the same class. And sometimes when I'm directing, I feel really I know everybody feels they don't have any idea what they're doing, but also I feel I don't have any original ideas. I'm still in the stage where I'm just imitating people. And I think about that Ira Glass quote that talks about you are making bad art because you have good taste, and you're looking at everything you want to make, and you still have to practice to get that. But if you understand that, you can make a replica That's not part of the quote, I don't think. But that always makes me think of like, if I really understand a genre, I should be able to replicate that genre, and then once I know how to replicate it, then I can break the form and do something new. Is that a quote from somebody? Anyway, I'm almost done. Yes, I'm just thinking about how like I'm not, I don't know how to produce anything new, but maybe this is my gateway into creating something that maybe isn't totally new, but is a new way of doing something old. Okay, that sounds really, I think that sounds really stupid. But anyway, you know what I mean? And yes, that's all. Just like creating experiences. That was the big picture. Okay, goodbye. Even though about a year ago, that's when I first noticed that I was talking about immersive theater and what that would mean for me, I also was really interested last year in the intersection between television and theater and how music plays a role in theater, and I'm still really interested in those things, but this year has really helped me solidify that I want to be doing these immersive experiences, and this project has made me realize how important that is and how necessary it can be. And I want my theater to always have a goal. So I'm very thankful for this project and for my classes this year for giving me that direction for what I want to focus on over the next few years with my art. Else that I want to mention in this conclusion is that I noticed as I was editing that I started almost interchangeably using the words immersive and interactive, and towards the last half of this semester I really started noticing that I was doing that and trying to separate the two. So I think that I know I want to make immersive experiences, but I also think that I'm leaning into more interactive immersive experiences versus that passive immersion. We talked about passive immersion and active immersion, and I think that active immersion is also really something I want to delve deeper into. That I have been focusing on passive immersion for a while, and yeah, I think that's just something I need to like sit with more. But I wanted to talk about it in this conclusion because definitely editing, I could realize that like I was learning, I was getting there, and I still have a lot to learn about that. I will say Dr. Blom mentioned it, and I mentioned it a little bit when we were going through the clips of the videos, but it's clear that the students had a better time, and it seemed that they were applying more of what they learned when they were also interacting with the immersive experiences. There's a lot of potential right now for going into these bigger, grander immersive experiences. The whole time I was doing this project, I thought back to Nathan, wait, what's his name? When I was doing this project, I thought about the TV show The Rehearsal, and even though that's supposed to be like a social commentary, the amount of budget that that show had and the amount that they were able to do to immerse their and their participants made the show so successful. And I keep imagining what these immersive experiences with goals, like As Much As I Can and like the autistic spectrum theater study, what those kind of projects would do with such a big budget. And yes, I think my takeaway is not only everything that I've learned from the Eyewitness project, important it is to be a responsible witness, how to be a responsible witness, and knowing all of the facts that I've learned from that and the statistics that I've learned from that. But aside from that, really my biggest takeaway from this year is that I know that I want to make these types of projects and that I'm really interested in where I can get involved with them in the future. It's really all. Thankful to Dr. Blom for letting me be a part of this project, and it has been the highlight of my year for sure, of my senior year. And I'm excited to see what I do in the future and what Dr. Blom does in the future that resembles this, and where these immersive interactive experiences can help students and audience members in the future. And leave you all with the wise words of Dr. Blom when I asked him, would you do this again in the future? Goodbye, everybody.
Yes, I have ideas. I think $1 or $2 million will do it.